Hello and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. So happy you could join us today. As always, at the bottom of the screen, we have the best way for you to find a forecast or to reach out to us outside of this program. You can call the phone number on your screen 24 hours a day to get a forecast for your general area. That number is 1-800-472-0391. You can also find us on the web if you have internet access at weather.gov/Alaska. And for any comments, questions, or feedback you have for us about the show, please feel free to email us at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. Once again, we don't have any hazardous weather watches, warnings, or advisories in effect, so we'll skip right ahead to our satellite imagery in which we can see a rapidly dissipating low pressure system spinning near the eastern Aleutians with clouds wrapping all the way up into the Bering Sea. We've got some gusty winds associated with that, but like I said, it is rapidly deteriorating and likely will not be around for long. So if we look at our surface chart for today, we can see that low pressure system about 990 millibars this afternoon. But as we head into tonight, it'll be really just the remnants of it left as we have just a trough through the area. So tonight we're looking at mostly clear skies and dry across much of the mainland, some freezing fog for the North Slope, but a bit of a break for the eastern Aleutians and the southern Alaska Peninsula, with those winds coming down. I know there were some gusty winds, particularly at Nikolsky today, gusting all the way up to the upper 50s miles per hour. But those should be coming down as that low pressure system dissipates. We can see, though, our next low pressure system already coming into the picture tonight, 980 millibar low coming into the western Aleutians. That's going to be increasing the winds for the western Aleutians tonight, as well as bringing in some additional precipitation. It's likely to be a mix of rain and snow. As we head into the day on Wednesday, that low pressure system impacting the Aleutians strengthens quite a bit down to 968 millibars. So with it, we'll see additional increases in winds, as well as some more precipitation, probably switching more over to rain during the day on Wednesday. Elsewhere across the state, we have weak low pressure system over southwest that might bring some rain and snow showers to the area, as well as potentially some snow showers for the Alaska range. Still mostly clear skies and dry conditions across the northern half of the mainland, though. Heading into Thursday, that low in the Aleutians continues to march eastward, so impacting the eastern Aleutians and the southern Alaska Peninsula, even all the way up into the Bristol Bay area on Thursday. We'll see some gusty winds, but not packing quite the punch that it's expected to pack on Wednesday, as that low will be weakening during the day on Thursday. And we will see some snow showers possible across South Central and Prince William Sound, as well as the Alaska range out ahead of this next system. Looking at temperatures for the next couple of days, low temperatures Wednesday morning for the southern and southeastern portion of the state. We're looking at upper 20s to mid 30s for the Panhandle. We've got our warm spot there, 38 degrees at Sitka. For South Central, we're looking at the 20s. We've got 29 at Anchorage, 24 at Talkeetna. 11 degrees, our normal cold spot there at Glen Allen. Heading into the day on Wednesday, we're looking at warmer temperatures, particularly for the southern Panhandle. Craig and Ketchikan both looking at 56 degrees for Wednesday afternoon. A little bit cooler for the rest of the Panhandle, but still a lot of places expected to reach 50 degrees. We've got mid 40s once again for South Central and the Kenai Peninsula, 45 there at Seward. And for Thursday morning, not a ton of change, a few degrees cooler for the Panhandle, a few degrees warmer for South Central, but overall we're still looking at lows generally in the 30s, 25 there at Kenai, our cold spot for the normally slightly warmer areas at least. Thursday afternoon, again, much the same. We're looking at mid to upper 50s for the southern Panhandle, 57 our warm spot there at Craig, 50s for much of the rest of the Panhandle as well, and 40s for the Prince William Sound area and South Central. Heading to the northern half of the state for low temperatures Wednesday morning, we've got lows around 0 to negative single digits for the North Slope, with -6 there at Dead Horse, our cold spot for Wednesday morning. For the interior, teens to 20s, 8 degrees there at Eagle for Wednesday morning. Eagle's actually had a couple of record low temperatures the last couple of mornings in the negative single digits, I think even getting down into the negative double digits a couple of nights ago, making for some impressive daily temperature swings of 50 degrees there at Eagle. Not that they reached 50 degrees, but the difference between their overnight low and their afternoon high was 50 degrees. So quite a lot of quite large swings for the interior that we're seeing with these clear skies, meaning lots of cooling at night as well as lots of warming during the day. Heading into Wednesday afternoon, we'll see another warm one across the interior with temperatures in the mid to upper 40s, 49 there at Fairbanks. As usual, we'll see a little bit cooler temperatures along the west coast with one of our cold spots there at Wales with only just a high of 28 degrees for Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning, not a whole lot of change in our low temperatures. We've got single digits positive to single digits negative again for the North Slope. Some teens and 20s for the interior and 20s there for much of the Norton Sound coast at least. And Thursday afternoon, a couple of degrees warmer across the interior, a number of spots looking to hit the 50-degree mark for Thursday afternoon. Also a couple of degrees warmer for the North Slope, getting up into the double digits positive with 10 degrees there at Utqiagvik expected Thursday afternoon. For Southwest, for Wednesday morning low temperatures, we've got temperatures in the upper 20s to 30s, 31 there at Bethel, 26, one of our cold spots at Makoriuk, and we've got mid 30s for the Aleutians for Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon, much the same as we've been seeing the last couple of days, maybe a little bit warmer with temperatures across Southwest, especially just inland from the coast, looking to get up into the mid 40s, upper 30s more likely right along the coast itself, and looking at upper 30s as well for the Aleutians. Thursday morning, we see a couple of degrees cooler in some spots, even in the Aleutians, which don't generally see a whole lot of change. We'll see some spots like Nikolsky at 32, a couple of degrees cooler than the night before. That is likely going to be due to some changes in winds. When we have stronger winds or the winds staying elevated overnight, we tend to see less cooling. So as the winds drop off, we'll see a little bit more cooling for those areas. And Thursday afternoon, a little bit warmer pretty much across the board, even some portions of the southwest coast reaching up into the 40s instead of just the upper 30s, and a couple of spots potentially breaking 50 degrees. Taking a look at our climate outlook for days 6 to 10. This is going to be for April 25th through 29th. So Monday through Friday of next week, your work week, we are looking at increased chances of warmer than usual temperatures for basically the western half of the state, from Prince William Sound all the way up to the Chukchi Sea coast and points westward. So including the west coast, including southwest, as well as including much of the Aleutians. And on the precipitation side, we are looking at drier than usual conditions for just the southernmost tier of the state, basically along the Gulf Coast, stretching from Dillingham and Bristol Bay across to the Kenai Peninsula, and then across the Panhandle. We're looking at slightly favoring below normal precipitation, but looking at the rest of the state, looking for more normal precipitation, although still we're in a pretty dry time of year, so even normal precipitation isn't very impressive right now. Next, we'll take a look at your aviation forecast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to a look at your aviation forecast, starting with your flying weather for Wednesday morning. We have some MVFR conditions scattered around southwest, mostly the YK Delta area, as well as portions of the westernmost Alaska range. Also some MVFR conditions in the higher terrain of the Panhandle, and some IFR conditions along the northeasternmost North Slope. With that system that we have in the Aleutians, we'll have some IFR conditions for the western Aleutians and MVFR conditions for the eastern Aleutians as well as the southern Alaska Peninsula. Heading into Wednesday afternoon, almost all of those non-VFR conditions over the mainland and peninsula improve to VFR, so mostly we're just left with some MVFR and IFR conditions for the Aleutians. That IFR area shifting towards the central and eastern Aleutians, with some IFR developing on the south side of the southern Alaska Peninsula. For Thursday morning, very similar story. We see IFR shifting further east into the eastern Aleutians and the southern Alaska Peninsula, stretching up through the central Bering to about St. Matthew Island, but VFR conditions for almost the entirety of the mainland as well as the Panhandle. And for Thursday afternoon, we see those IFR conditions continuing to shift north and east up the Alaska Peninsula, but some improvement over the central Bering in the area of St. Matthew Island to MVFR conditions. We'll also see some MVFR conditions in the Chukchi Sea and Bering Strait areas, as well as along the north side of Seward Peninsula. Heading into our pass conditions, much as we saw, or as we will see today, I should say, on Wednesday we'll see VFR conditions at most of our passes. Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass both expected to be VFR on Wednesday. Lake Clark and Merrill passes are going to be our exceptions, where we're looking at conditions starting out the day on Wednesday at MVFR, but then improving to VFR on Wednesday afternoon. Rainy Pass, same story, MVFR Wednesday morning, but improving to VFR Wednesday afternoon. Windy Pass as well as Isabel Pass, both looking VFR all day on Wednesday, and Mentasta Pass as well as Tanita Pass and Portage Pass, all looking like VFR on Wednesday. And finally, Chilkoot and White Passes starting the day at MVFR on Wednesday morning, but improving to VFR Wednesday afternoon. For our freezing levels on Wednesday morning, we have our surface freezing level going across the central Bering and then across the northern Alaska Peninsula, across the northern Gulf, and just touching the coastal Panhandle. We've got a couple of different areas of some warmer air. One is over the Chukchi Sea coast, about 2,000 foot freezing level there. Another is over the Panhandle, about 2,000 feet of freezing level there. And then some warmer air on the south side of that low in the Aleutians. So on the south side of the western Aleutians, we're seeing freezing levels anywhere from 2,000 to about 8,000 feet, increasing as we head south from the Aleutians. For icing on Wednesday, a couple of different areas. We've got the western Aleutians, some isolated moderate icing between about 2,000 and 6,000 feet. For the eastern Aleutians, the southwest Alaska and the Alaska Peninsula, some isolated moderate icing between about 2,000 and 8,000 feet. And then another area of isolated moderate icing for Prince William Sound and parts of the northern Gulf above about 4,000 feet there. For our jet stream winds on Wednesday, nothing terribly impressive across the area. The jet is mostly staying south of the area. We do see kind of an arcing jet over the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, coming out of the southwest and then arcing up and then out of the north on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula, peaking at about 105 knots there. At 9,000 feet, we can see a little bit better picture of the lows that we're looking at. We've got that low near the western Aleutians with the strongest winds on the west side of that low. Those winds are going to be up to about 75 knots. They're going to be out of the northeast. But not much to talk about in the way of winds over the mainland or the Panhandle at 9,000 feet on Wednesday. And at 3,000 feet, pretty much the same picture. We've got that low near the western Aleutians with the strongest winds arcing up across the north side of that low. So anywhere from about 45 to 60 knots from the eastern Aleutians all the way over to the western Aleutians, and those winds are going to be going counterclockwise around that low pressure system. And finally, also associated with that low, we have up to some isolated severe turbulence for the eastern Aleutians and central Aleutians between the surface and 3,000 feet on Wednesday.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the program.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
And once again, you brought some wonderful satellite pictures to show us and do a little show and tell about. It's just amazing. I can get lost in satellite pictures all day. What did you bring today?
Right. Well, weather satellites, what are they good for? Yeah. Of course, there's the pretty pictures that they bring us. You know, we've got a picture here from April of 2012. Okay. The Sumi NPP satellite, it's what they call a polar orbiter, which means it covers Alaska because we're near the pole. Beautiful image. You can see a storm off of southeast Alaska, the sea ice along the Bering Sea up into the Arctic. A really nice picture, and this is important because it allows a forecaster to see where the storms are, where the ice is, where the clear areas are. You need to know where the weather is now if you're going to forecast it into the future. Exactly. So satellites give us these good pictures. This is called surveillance of the weather. And you know, that same satellite also has another picture from a little more recently, August of 2014, Tropical Storm Iselle bearing down on the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaii doesn't get hit by a whole lot of tropical storms or hurricanes. Sometimes it does. And here's a picture from the same satellite, the Sumi NPP Polar Orbiter. It shows Tropical Storm Iselle approaching the Hawaiian Islands from the southeast. You can see the storm swirling away there, and then there's the Hawaiian Islands. This is a tropical storm, not quite as strong as a hurricane because we don't see the eye wall in there. This is still a serious weather system. And all of this information comes just from that satellite picture. It's so much information, and it's wonderful to look at. You see the beauty and the awe of nature right there depicted in that weather satellite. We call it a polar orbiter because the satellite flies high over the globe. Maybe we could look here at we happen to bring the planet Earth with us. This is our satellite. A polar orbit flies really close to the Earth, maybe 800 kilometers over the Earth, and goes up over the pole and then back down, and then the Earth spins under the satellite as it goes by. That's in contrast to the geostationary birds, which are much further out. And they don't view Alaska quite as well. So we love those polar orbiter satellites here in Alaska.
So when we're a lot closer, we get much better details and imagery and an idea of a better maybe position of what's going on when it's passing right over Alaska or right over Hawaii.
Yes, exactly right. The polar orbiter gives such a good view of places like Alaska. And because it's close to the planet, there's another aspect of satellites in the polar orbit that is helpful for weather forecasting. It's an aspect that's maybe not as immediately obvious as the pretty pictures that we see. And that is the capacity for the satellite to produce what's called a sounding. That is finding the vertical profile of temperature and moisture in the atmosphere. We've all heard of weather balloons. Weather balloons are launched here in Alaska twice a day at a number of airports, everywhere from Barrow to St. Paul Island to Kodiak, Anchorage and Fairbanks, Yakutat, a number of places. Launch these balloons, and we've got a picture of a balloon being launched at an airport, and the balloon goes up. It's pulling a little package, an instrument package with it that reports temperature, pressure, humidity data back, and we use that information to help feed what are called numerical weather prediction models.
The models.
The models, right. It's a mouthful, so we just call it the models. And these computer simulations, these models are computer programs that simulate the motion of the atmosphere. Well, how does a model know what the future will be like? You have to tell the model what things are like now. And you give it all kinds of information, including information from these satellite sounders. Very important. Just how important are they? We have a recent, comparatively recent study that really brings home, and this is Superstorm Sandy. We have a track image here of the track of Hurricane Sandy. It was down in the Caribbean around Cuba, and then it moved north over the ocean, offshore of the eastern seaboard, and then at the last minute, Sandy made what's called the left hook. It turned hard to the left and slammed into New Jersey. Was a major problem for the mid-Atlantic states, a calamity. It fused with another weather system and became known, this is not an official title, but Superstorm Sandy. It was quite the weather event. Well, the modelers, after the event, there's a group of modelers in Europe. They have a very good model, a frustratingly good model if you're the Americans trying to pursue their excellence. They reran their model afterwards in what's called a data denial study, where they kept everything the same. So this is 6 months after Sandy, but they went back, they reran the same model, they fed the model the same initial conditions, that is telling the model, okay, here's where we think Sandy is, down near Cuba in the Caribbean. Everything was the same as it was in the real forecast, except they didn't let the model know.
No satellite data.
No satellite data.
Okay.
So we're going to put that over here, no satellite data for you. The resulting forecast 5 days out, back when the real Sandy was happening and the model had the satellite data, the forecast was pretty good. We've got a graphic here on the left side. We show the forecast of where Sandy would be, and that's the red bullseye on the left. It's just south of where it actually wound up hitting. Not a bad forecast from this computer simulation, 120 hours out. On the right, you see the same model, but it didn't have the satellite data to help it understand things. And the storm is way offshore. It misses. The forecast is more accurate when the model has the satellite data. So that's the idea today we want to convey is weather satellites. They're important because they show us the pictures of where storms are. We see good examples of this. Yeah, the surveillance right now, it's great to look at those pictures. And in addition, behind the scenes, maybe not immediately obvious, but the models have to have that satellite data for them to be good forecasts. And then a meteorologist uses that information to help everyone with the forecast of where the storms will be in the future.
That is fascinating information that we can look and see where things have been, because you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. That's that old adage there. But seeing that satellites are actually helping us move forward in the weather information system is pretty amazing stuff.
You bet.
And if you want to check out Eric's satellite images that he's been talking about, whether that's something from today or last week or even much further back in Alaska history, you can easily do that yourself. Go to www.gina.alaska.edu and you can find those images there. Eric, thanks so much for joining us once again. And again, we will join you hopefully again soon for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, where you'll tell us more really cool information about the satellites over our heads in Alaska. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. We'll take a look at the marine forecast now, starting with the sea ice edge. Looking at the statewide picture today so we can get a better idea of where the high and slightly less high concentrations of ice are. We can still see that there's been rapid melting along the southern edge of the ice, even just over the last few days with that strong low pressure system bringing southerly winds into the area. The ice is now about 200 nautical miles north of St. Paul, whereas just a few days ago it was almost still at St. Paul. So rapid deterioration of the southern edge of the ice, and mostly because that ice there was new ice. If you remember back, let's say a month ago, there wasn't any ice all the way down to St. Paul. And so that ice actually was brand new. So it wasn't as thick and was able to deteriorate a lot more quickly. We do expect from this point on to see more deterioration of the ice, and you can see there are already some more areas of less than 80% concentration further north in the Bering, as well as even a couple of spots in the Chukchi Sea. As we move into our winds and seas forecast for southeast, for Wednesday, we're looking at generally easterly winds 10 to 20 knots across the Gulf with seas 9 to 12 feet. We've got northerly flow for the inside passage, about 15 knots of wind there. As we head into Thursday, winds and seas both coming down. Still northeast flow, but coming down to about 10 knots, about 7 to 12 foot seas, and 10 to 15 knots of wind still across the inside waterways. For South Central on Wednesday, we've got about 10 knots of wind across the board, variable directions, some northerly flow, some westerly flow, seas ranging anywhere from about 5 to 9 feet across the Gulf and about 2 feet in Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet. For Thursday, winds and seas both coming up a little bit as we get into more easterly and southerly flow, at least in the Gulf itself. Winds as high as about 30 knots near the Barrens out of the east, and seas coming up to 7 to 9 feet for the Gulf. Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Wednesday, winds 10 to 20 knots on the lighter side for Wednesday, but as we head into Thursday, we'll have our next system coming in, bringing those winds and seas up. So we're looking at gale force winds 35 to 40 knots of wind generally out of the east, seas all the way up to 12 to 15 feet. And we'll see the opposite for the Aleutians on Wednesday. We'll see our higher winds and seas 35 all the way up to 50 knots of wind generally out of the east, and seas up to about 18 feet. But those are coming down on Thursday for the western Aleutians, while they increase a little bit more for the eastern Aleutians on Thursday as that system moves east. So 30 to 40 knots of wind for the eastern Aleutians on Thursday. Seas there coming up to 12 to 15 feet, but seas for the western Aleutians coming down to 13 to 14 feet on Thursday. Wednesday for the west coast, generally light winds, about 10 knots, kind of variable directions. As usual, our strongest winds down by the Pribilovs out of the east, about 20 knots. And for Thursday, we see that system coming into the west coast as well. So stronger gale force winds near the Pribilovs out of the northeast, about 35 knots there. A little bit lighter further north, but still increasing from Thursday to about 15 to 25 knots. And for the Arctic coast, we're looking at 10 to 15 knots out of the east for Wednesday. And for Thursday, maybe a slight increase in winds to more 15 knots across the board, still mostly out of the east. Recapping our weather picture for tonight and the coming days, we've got that low pressure system that's going to be dissipating over the eastern Aleutians tonight, so winds and seas coming down. But then we have our next system quickly coming into the western Aleutians starting tonight, and that will rapidly strengthen into Wednesday down to 968 millibars. So expect some rapidly increasing winds and seas for the Aleutians on Wednesday. And then as we head into Thursday, that system will deteriorate just a little bit down or up to about 971 millibars. So not packing quite the same punch, but still expect some windy conditions as well as precipitation coming into the eastern Aleutians and up into the Alaska Peninsula. Even some rain-snow mix possible across southwest Alaska with this system on Thursday. We'll also see the potential for some snow showers across the Alaska Range as well as Prince William Sound and South Central on Thursday. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.